Ready? This is Byron Lazine and Nicole White, and you are tuned in to episode 17 of The Real Word. Nicole, nothing.
Here we
You've
are.
got absolutely nothing. I do the intro. You do a little like color.
Oh, I do a little
then we
color.
go back. You know, like then we
Well,
go
I
back
mean-
and forth. That's kind of like the thing.
So
Well, we're
maybe
gonna do
that's
some
what's
serious
affecting me.
talk today.
Yep,
Are you cool with that?
I'm good with it.
Getting really really serious.
Yeah.
So, what do you think? Good topic.
I think it's a great topic. Yeah, no, and I think
Are
that
we gonna
it's-
share it with
no,
everybody?
Yeah, share away.
I'm gonna share, and we'll link this up. Sam will link it up in whether you're watching YouTube or SoundCloud, listening. The name of the article, Inman article,
March 16th.
March 16th.
It's a couple days old.
Super relevant here.
Mhm.
FEMA underestimates flooding risk to millions of Americans per study. A new analysis finds that property at risk of flooding is double the current FEMA risk, and 41 million Americans could be impacted.
Yeah. So initially, when you brought up the
And
article,
we're in waterfront communities.
we are
So,
definitely
like-
in waterfront communities. Even if people in Connecticut think that they're in the mountains, they're in a
Mountains of Connecticut.
I guess I would
the vast
hills.
mountains that we have.
Well, I think people think that because they're north that they're not at risk of flooding, but
Sure.
that's not true at all. And it's funny though, because I remember, I think it was 2013. FEMA did a remap. Was it 13 or was it 11?
Yeah, it was in that time
It was
frame.
sort of right around
Yep.
that time. There was this huge remapping, and there were so many homes that were not in flood zones. All of a sudden, got switched into flood zones.
It was really serious around here
It
after
was-
Sandy.
Right. Yeah. Well, and it's funny though, because everyone was like bitching and complaining. And I feel like as agents, we were just like, oh, like FEMA's just like looking to make their money back. So they're like throwing people into
They're
a
just
flood
doing
zone.
their thing, man.
And it's interesting because this article actually completely 100% contradicts that, because it sounds like there's people that are not still in flood zones that are 100% at risk of being flooded.
Yeah. And I know we've talked about it on the radio, I believe, where if you are not in a flood zone right now,
Right.
you can get a flood policy. So my parents are the prime example because I've been advising them to do this. They're not in a
Oh,
flood
look
zone.
at you. Such a good advisor.
They're not in a flood zone currently. Get the policy now so that
Right.
you can grandfather that policy over, because right now it would be
Yeah.
about $650 for them approximately.
You would hope, though. So again, I mean, so the article goes over lots of different things. Hopefully, they would still be allowed to do that, because some policies
Right now,
are,
my point is, right now they can.
Well, not all policies can be transferred. So you want to make sure that you do get a policy that is
That can be transferred.
transferable.
Yep.
Right.
Because
yeah.
we do that a lot on properties that we sell,
Right.
where the current homeowner has a policy that's much more affordable than what the new buyer would get on a new policy, and that policy is now grandfathered over to the new buyer.
You have to be super mindful, though, too, because I ran into a situation where the current owner of the home, it was their primary residence, and the buyers coming in, it was a second home. So there are multiple layers here when it comes to flood policies and insurance
absolutely.
in general. So we're not trying to pretend like we know it all, but
We're
do
not
know,
insurance agents,
No,
by
not
the
at
way.
all. Maybe we should put that along, like scrolling along the bottom.
A little flash.
But because again, you do run into a little bit of a situation when it comes to transferring policies if it's a second home or a primary residence, because there is a little bit of a cost differential.
Differentiator?
Differential.
What do you got?
Differential.
Cost difference?
Difference. There's a difference in cost.
Well, a lot of this gets brought to our attention after these big storms. Like for us locally, it was Sandy.
Right.
And then Harvey, obviously, in Houston. And in Houston, there was about 41, some number here, some ridiculous
Crazy
number.
amounts.
FEMA estimated that, I wish I could find the number really quick for you. I can't. It was a crazy amount of homes in that Houston area that were not in a flood zone that were impacted.
Right.
So that, and here's the number here that
Oh, look,
that
you
I
just
thought
floated
like kind of floated into my
Look at that.
vision here. This is a little bit different, but by some calculations, the current flooding represents the third 500-year flood in the Houston area in the past 5 years. So they had 3. So it should be good for 1,500 years then, right?
Well, you would think.
Get them right in a row. Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, I mean, and those people that are in the X500 zone, they're not even required to have a policy.
Correct.
Yeah.
And at times, yeah.
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 Usually you're not.
So I think certainly Houston's going to remap. Look at their mapping.
Right. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, so I live in an 1875 home, and I am in a flood zone, but because my home was built pre-firm, I do get a lower rate. So there are obviously, but probably in those areas, you're not talking about these old historic homes. I honestly also think that what will be interesting, though, too, is because when you are in a flood zone, if you do renovate a property, there is a 50% rule, too. So, I mean, that could actually impact, these 1970s homes that need some updating or some
like all of a sudden you're on the new flood zone, right? And you're just like trying to do a renovation.
Yeah. Ooh, if you go over that 50% rule, I mean, you're having to lift.
If someone doesn't know the 50% rule?
Okay. So if you're in a flood zone and you want to renovate a home that is in a flood zone, you don't have to.
We call it the FEMA 50-50 rule, like slang. That's probably not like the appropriate.
No, but it sort of waters it down for the consumer because it can get a little cumbersome. So you're only able to renovate the home 50% of the assessed value. Now that's the assessed value of just the structure, not like the land. It's just the structure. So once you hit that 50% mark, over the 50% mark, you then have to follow the FEMA guideline, which is like raising it out of the flood zone, all that fun stuff. So that's going to play a huge.
So some people, like in community, we've seen it a lot in communities that we're working in, will opt to just literally tear the house down and build to FEMA standards.
Right, but I mean, you think about a homeowner that is maybe
doesn't want to tear their house down, just wants to do a beautiful kitchen.
Absolutely, but like again, they're in like a modest, $150,000 home. That like they're just sort of getting by, and there's substantial renovations that they need to do or what have you, or who the hell knows, or maybe it was left to them in a will, and I mean that could really impact a lot of people. It was sort of like when the taxes along the shoreline all of a sudden went through the roof, and like you were seeing like families like fleeing from like their family homes because they like the taxes just sort of it'll end up being probably the same sort of situation. So
FEMA said basically 41 more million people could potentially be impacted, meaning if they have a mortgage, they're going to be forced into this flood insurance.
Right.
And
don't just think that's coastal. There are plenty of communities in this, even just in our state, that are, even near like the Hartford area, like that's so far away from the ocean, that are absolutely 100% in flood zones. So just because you're not on the water, don't think that you're like.
It did say that potentially in this article, you add more people to the pool, maybe you can cap these. And they threw out the $10,000 number as a cap. We've seen flood insurance get up as high as $15,000.
Right.
And so that's pretty ridiculous. So having a cap on it would be nice. But there's going to be a lot of people that are like, oh, nothing's ever flooded here. If this floods, the whole world's flooding type of thing. And they're not going to want to pay flood insurance. So 41 million people impacted. The ultimate question is, do you think this is a racket, or do you think this is like legit that?
Well, I think it's a big old flipping racket. But I mean, you obviously can't deny the things that are happening though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's been some crazy devastation. People are losing their homes.
3 500-year floods in the last 3 years in Houston.
But it's like devastating towns and homes and people's futures, and like, I guess I also don't blame the fact that FEMA needs to start doing these things to even just protect the consumer. Like as a homeowner, I guess I would, as much as I don't want to pay a flood policy, I would much rather pay that, $2,500 policy if there was ever a potential for me to be flooded, so that if there is devastation, my family isn't, sort of reaping the horribleness of that for 20 years.
It's definitely a racket. They're definitely going to make up for these storms one way or another.
They're always going to make up for the storms.
That's
an interesting twist. Maybe this is a whole like hoaxy thing to get some money.
It could be. Jeez.
What do you think?
Absolutely. Insurance companies? Come on.
I hear you.
I mean,
I hear you.
all my insurance peeps, I love you,
I
but
hear you.
let's face the facts.
Well, you're just gonna have to start buying your homes with cash. So start stockpiling
Yeah.
your money,
Or-
because obviously you won't if you're not doing a mortgage. This
Yeah.
is all sort of a moot point in terms of being required to carry flood.
But the other big piece of advice I would give you, the same advice I'm giving my parents right now, I hope they actually did it because we talked about this a while ago.
Your mom was just here. We should
have forced
Should
her
have asked
on
her.
the video and asked her.
Yeah.
Ma, the meatloaf. No, if you're in a waterfront community and you aren't required flood insurance right now, I would just get it. Get the preferred risk. FEMA for preferred risk is somewhere around $650, that lower end number. And now you have, if you can transfer that, talk to your insurance agent. If you can transfer that to another buyer, that could in 5 years become very, very valuable
Absolutely.
in your sales. Because I believe that properties in waterfront communities that have elevation, that have a view over the water, and not necessarily like where you're just walking out and you're at the same
Or maybe it's
level
sort of like
the
a
sea,
gift. Like you're
I think those
gifting-
properties go up in value.
Be a gift too, like a seller's gift to a buyer. Instead of doing like a home warranty or something.
It's
It's like brilliant.
it's a gift, and it's just maintaining your value. Because think about it: if you have $10,000, if you're at the max, you're $10,000 in flood insurance, or you're grandfathering over a $650 a year policy, and somebody's looking at two comparable homes on the water. One has 10,000, one has 650. I'm going to live there 10 years. Well, geez, I'm taking, I don't know, $100,000 off of the value of this home
Right.
in comparison to that one.
Right.
So
Yeah, buying power.
certainly look at that. Although it is a racket,
It's a super racket. I'm
Navigate
curious what's
it
going on. Like
to
people
your
are finding
best
though in like
potential.
their communities. Like if you're an insurance guy, like what
Absolutely.
do you think is going to happen?
absolutely. If you or tag somebody that's in insurance to this video, love to hear their 2 cents. I'm certain we're missing some stuff. We're going over the very macro part of this article, but
Yeah.
not, if
And
you're
I'm
an
s-
insurance agent, dig in.
Yeah. No, I'm curious. Yeah. Just
Awesome.
maybe you like were in a flood zone. Now you are in a flood zone. That's the racket.
That's a
are we allowed to
racket.
swear? Are we swearing on this?
That's okay.
We're swearing on this. Oh,
It's,
just do
it's
the
right at the
woo.
end. If you heard that
Do the
swear,
woo.
drop us a
I
comment.
think last time I got a whistle, right? It was like a woo.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll whistle it.
You drop a little comment if you heard
Oh,
that one.
boy.
Awesome. Let us know what you think. FEMA, 41 million people. We'll see you guys next time on The Real Word, or maybe it'll be The Racket.
Maybe it will be a racket.